Hey, where are you right now? It's about to start. I raised my voice as if interrogating my smartphone. Today is our beloved daughter Julie's wedding. Next to me is Julie, dressed in a pure white wedding gown. It's almost time for the guests to arrive, but my husband and son, along with my in-laws, haven't shown up yet. So I called my husband on speakerphone, with Julie by my side, to ask when they'll arrive at the venue. Got a last-minute cancellation on a flight yesterday, so we ended up going to Palm Springs for a trip because it was super cheap. My husband cheerfully said. I was stunned by his words. Does he have any idea how many miles Palm Springs is from here? And the wedding is about to start. It's our daughter's wedding. My in-laws have always favored my son, spoiling him endlessly while treating my daughter dismissively. So, I had suspected they might not be too keen on attending today's wedding, but to do something like this. Unbelievable. I'm at a loss for words. Disgust. Disappointment. Emptiness. Various emotions flashed through my mind. I see. Have fun then, was all I could say before I quickly ended the call. On what should have been a joyous day for my daughter to be a bride, what a thing to do. Her father and her brother couldn't be more disgraceful. Yet, Mom, let's just go ahead and start the ceremony, Julie says with a smile, looking beautiful in her dress. It's okay. It's not like I wasn't expecting this. Leave it to me. I'm Michelle. A 50-year-old working woman. I live with my husband Tim of the same age, our 24-year-old son, and 23-year-old daughter Julie. We live in a large regional city, where each family member is busy with their own work. My parents' home is about an hour's drive away, but Tim's parents live just a few minutes away on foot. When we got married, Tim argued that having a close family would make raising children easier, so we decided to buy a house here. In fact, Tim initially took it for granted that we would live with his parents, but I opposed it, and that's how we ended up in our current situation. I had no intention of quitting my job, and indeed, balancing work and home life is challenging. Living with my in-laws wouldn't have allowed us to maintain our family's lifestyle as I saw it. Frankly, I always felt my in-laws' home was like a fortress for the stay-at-home mother-in-law. Entering that house as a daughter-in-law would undoubtedly have meant hardship. My father-in-law and mother-in-law are somewhat old-fashioned, believing that women should devote themselves to the home after marriage and that the eldest son is most important. So, when I married Tim and chose not to quit my job, I often faced their sarcasm, and they repeatedly pressured me to have a son. I was relieved that we didn't live with them. About 6 months into our marriage, I got pregnant, and the joy of my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Tim when they found out it was a boy was overwhelming. Moreover, Michelle, you have work, right? Don't worry, we'll take care of the baby, my mother-in-law said with a smile. Despite all the snide remarks about a working daughter-in-law, it was like a sudden change of heart. Indeed, after giving birth, my mother-in-law came to our house almost daily. She was so eager to take care of my son, staying for long hours, that I never got a moment's peace, couldn't sleep properly, and was constantly exhausted. Even though she was in our house, she barely did any housework, clinging to my son. I had to do everything, even though I was still recovering. If I had to be this active, I would have been better off alone with my baby. However, it was hard to outright tell my mother-in-law that she was a burden, so I continued to feel frustrated. My breast milk quickly dried up. Clearly due to lack of sleep and stress. At first, I was disappointed. Breastfeeding was a happy time for me, a precious moment of bonding without interference from my mother-in-law. However, I soon saw the silver lining. After all, one of the challenges of leaving a child is that they might not take anything but breast milk. Since my mother-in-law had been set to take care of Mark even before he was born, and given how often she came to our house, I figured going to work might be less stressful. So, I took advantage of the situation and returned to work 2 months postpartum. As a working parent, having someone to take care of the kids is a godsend. Finding a daycare is hard enough, and the fees aren't exactly pocket change. But to have it done just a stone's throw away from home, for a nominal fee, is clearly a great deal. So, I gratefully asked them to look after my son, but gradually, I started feeling uneasy. My son would spend all day at my in-laws, coming home only to sleep. When I'd go to pick him up after work, it was a given they'd say, "Oh, he can stay a bit longer," and on days off, they'd come over saying, "Let Michelle rest, I'll take care of him," and scoop up my son. It was blatantly obvious my mother-in-law was overly attached to my son, almost as if she was trying to take him away from me. And this wasn't just my imagination, as I realized after giving birth to my daughter a year and 10 months after my son. Once I went back to work after my daughter was born, both kids would be left at my in-laws. The difference in treatment between my son and daughter was stark. My mother-in-law doted on Mark, barely paying any attention to Julie, who'd be left lying in her crib. When I'd come to pick them up, Mark was always clinging to them, while Julie was, "Why don't you take her home?" Even if Julie was crying, she wouldn't be picked up, priority always given to Mark's play. The disparity wasn't just because Mark could talk, or because Julie was still a baby who couldn't do much. It was more than that. My in-laws and Tim would spoil Mark rotten, calling him the precious son, while Julie was practically treated like she didn't exist. On the rare occasions they did pay attention to her, it was only to insist she obey Mark. Whenever the two had a squabble, Julie was automatically the one to be scolded, regardless of the reason or cause. Mark was always the priority. If he wanted something of Julie's, my in-laws would take it from her and give it to him. They revered Mark, the eldest son, as if it were a religion, forcing Julie to be subservient and sacrificial. This was the case since they were little, and nothing changed as they grew. Of course, I thought this was wrong and repeatedly confronted Tim about it. I wanted them to treat both kids equally and to communicate that to his parents. But Tim wouldn't hear of it. Instead, he'd say, "Mark is the eldest son, so it's only natural." Tim, being an only child and spoiled like a prince, saw this as normal. The eldest son should be favored in all things, and it was natural for women to follow men, so there was nothing wrong with Mark being given priority in everything. No matter how much I explained, he didn't understand, and I was shocked by his belief and his lack of questioning it. I thought I married Tim because he was confident and reliable, someone who valued his parents. But it turned out, his confidence wasn't backed by effort but by unwarranted praise, leading to inflated pride, and he was just a mama's boy. I regret not realizing this before we got married. Knowing this couldn't continue, I tried to separate Mark and Julie from my in-laws. I told them we were fine since daycare could take care of them until after work, and actually enrolled them, but Tim went behind my back because his mother wanted to pick them up, and she'd end up taking the kids home during my work hours. She even tried to leave Julie at the daycare and only take Mark, causing trouble with the daycare to the point where we were asked to refrain from using their services if we had someone to take care of them. The same happened with the after-school program. Eventually, we couldn't use it because of my mother-in-law's insistence on taking Mark. I thought things would get better as they got older and could stay home alone, avoiding visits to my in-laws. But they spoiled Mark even more, luring him with sweet words and gifts, making me and Julie out to be the villains, convincing Mark that his allies were his grandparents and father. Mark grew up heavily influenced by my in-laws and Tim. He'd demand anything from them, and they'd comply, while increasingly talking down to me and Julie. If he had demands for us, he'd speak in commands. If he didn't get his way, he'd throw a tantrum. If I refused a request or scolded Mark, he'd immediately seek support from Tim or my in-laws. Eventually, Mark grew up without much effort in finding a job, getting into the same company as Tim through his connections. Tim boasted about asking the CEO directly, but I was more worried about whether he could actually fulfill his job responsibilities. In stark contrast to her brother, my daughter Julie had been diligently researching industries since her junior year of college, visiting various companies, and ultimately received a job offer from the company where she wanted to work. For Mark's job celebration, my in-laws only sent designer suits and shoes. For Julie, there was nothing. Not even a congratulatory word. I've watched how hard Julie worked, so I wholeheartedly told her, "Well done, congratulations," treated her to a nice meal, and bought her a commuter bag as a celebration. Her effort and the outcome deserved praise. By now, Julie was used to the lack of interest from my in-laws, but as a parent, it was still hard to accept that my children were treated so differently. A few years after Julie started working, she decided to marry a colleague from her company. The young man who came to visit us seemed kind and looked like he would cherish Julie. Seeing them look at each other with gentle smiles, I felt assured they would build a happy home together. The young couple had carefully planned their wedding, choosing a venue that fit their budget and fulfilled their wishes. As their parent, I barely had to intervene, only offering help when asked. It seemed that Tim, Mark, and my in-laws showed little interest in Julie's wedding. Julie herself had invited them, so I didn't know the details, but from her comment, "I've sent the invitations," I could easily guess it was the usual lack of enthusiasm. It's disheartening that they showed so little interest in their beloved daughter's wedding. I often think I should have divorced Tim sooner. Divorce is said to be difficult, and I couldn't bring myself to make such a significant change, but their attitude is disrespectful to Julie and her husband. I want to support Julie as much as possible so she can start her new life happily. On Julie's wedding day, the venue was an exclusive one, available for only one couple per day. Although the ceremony was in the afternoon, the bride and groom were busy from the morning with their preparations. Thus, I took on the responsibility of welcoming guests and coordinating with friends who were helping out. It was the least I could do as the mother of the bride. I was allowed early access to the venue to get ready and familiarize myself with the place. And I was the first to see my daughter in her beautiful dress. Despite the busy schedule, there were many perks to enjoy. However, as the time to welcome the guests approached, there was still no sign of Tim, Mark, or my in-laws. They didn't have specific roles, so it wasn't a problem if they arrived with the other guests. But I had hoped that at least Tim and Mark would be there to help greet them. "Mom?" Julie, dressed in her wedding gown, approached me in the prep area. "Did Dad and the others come?" "They haven't arrived yet." "Should I call them?" It was almost time for me to meet the guests. I couldn't help feeling angry that they couldn't even show up for such an important day. I took out my smartphone and called Tim, putting it on speaker so Julie could hear. The phone rang. I was relieved it was at least ringing. "Hello? Hey, where are you right now? It's about to start." "We're in Palm Springs." "What? Palm Springs?" "Yeah, we found a last-minute flight deal yesterday and ended up going to Palm Springs for a spa trip." Tim sounded cheerful. "Yesterday? But today is Julie's wedding. You do realize today is Saturday, right? We've taken Monday off too, so we'll be here until then." "Who's there with you?" "Dad, Mom, and Mark." That Monday off was supposed to be for sending off Julie's in-laws. They live far away and came here for the wedding. We hadn't been able to meet before, so we planned to have lunch and formally say goodbye after the wedding. "So you knew what today was and still went to Palm Springs?" "Well, Mark wanted to go since we got the plane tickets, so we thought, why not?" "Right, Mark?" I heard Julie sigh deeply. "That's enough." She looked up, resigned. The conversation had been on speakerphone, so the surrounding staff were already buzzing with the news. With them in Palm Springs now, there was no way they could make it to the wedding. Julie asked a nearby attendant to call the wedding planner, likely to inform them her family wouldn't be coming. To cause such trouble and stress for the bride on her wedding day. "Jealous, huh? We're on a family trip to Palm Springs." Tim's voice was high with excitement, and I could hear Mark laughing in the background. It was clear who Tim meant by family. At least Julie and I were not included in that. I felt something snap inside me. "Okay. Have fun then," I said and immediately ended the call. It was pointless. I couldn't find the words. Disgust. Disappointment. Emptiness. Various emotions came and went. "Mom, we're gonna start the ceremony now," Julie said. Just like that. With the family seats empty. "It's okay. It's not like I didn't expect this. Leave it to me." Julie smiled confidently in her beautiful dress. I felt sorry, but truly she was dependable. Julie is my pride. The ceremony went on without the bride's brother, father, and paternal grandparents. There were moments when the groom's side and the guests were visibly unsettled by their absence, but the couple proceeded with happy smiles. Next, we have a letter from the bride, Julie. As the host spoke, the lights dimmed, and a spotlight shone on Julie. Thank you all for being here today, despite your busy schedules, to attend our wedding. Standing in front of the microphone, Julie began her speech in a clear voice, holding the letter. First, I would like to address the empty seats on my family's side. I apologize for the absence of my father, brother, and paternal grandparents. I'm truly sorry, she said, causing the hall to fall into a hushed silence. Those close to me already know, but I've been disregarded by them all my life. I did send them invitations, and they had confirmed their attendance, but they went on a trip to Palm Springs yesterday. They told me just before the ceremony that they'd be enjoying their Monday off there. The revelation stirred the room into a murmur. Understandably so. It was painful to have Julie disclose such a thing on her special day. However, this wasn't unexpected for me, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to share the truth with you all. It's pretty clear who's out of line, right? Julie's attempt to lighten the mood with a bit of humor elicited soft laughter from the audience, somewhat easing the atmosphere. I couldn't help but admire my daughter, who could boldly express her feelings and shape the mood of the room. Despite being raised close to such a father and grandparents, without being influenced by them in the slightest. They always looked down on me and my mother, treating us coldly. I was hurt as a child, but my mother always stood up for me. Julie looked my way. I thought I was protecting her, but I realize now it was she who always supported me. It was Julie's presence that kept me going. I've prepared a letter, which I finished writing yesterday, intending to read it with no empty seats in my family section. Please understand this as you listen. Julie opened the letter she was holding. Her husband stood beside her, gazing at her tenderly, supporting her. Julie's voice filled the hall as she began to read the letter, expressing gratitude to the attendees and joy at being able to marry. After all the thank yous, I've written about my gratitude that I rarely get to express. Mom, I've watched you juggle work and home responsibilities since I was a child. You've always been there for me, making me never feel lonely. You prepared nutritious, delicious meals and were my go-to for advice on makeup and fashion. You're the most reliable and admirable woman I know. Before I was even aware, my paternal grandparents and dad would often say, "It's a shame you weren't born a boy," or "If you're going to be an unwanted child, at least be useful to your brother." But every time, Mom would hug me and say, "Julie is my treasure. Let's find lots of things you love and enjoy them together." Even though you were treated harshly by them, you always smiled to protect me. I'm truly grateful and admire you for that. Thanks to the love you poured into me, no matter how harshly my paternal grandparents, dad, and brother treated me, I never forgot how to enjoy and be kind. I can't thank you enough, and I love you more than words can say. From now on, I will protect you. I will return all the love you gave me, with even more love. The only person I could ever call family was you, Mom. Now that I'm married, my family has grown. Let's enjoy and be happy together, Mom, Julie said, smiling at me, her brightness bringing me to tears. She turned out to be such a kind soul, and all I feel is gratitude. Julie thanked me, but she doesn't know how much strength her presence has given me. I want her to feel a lot of happiness with her husband and the children they'll have someday, expanding her beloved family. I want to tell her that would be the best way she could repay my love. After Julie finished reading her letter, warm applause lasted for a long time. The wedding was reaching its climax, and all that was left for us to do was the final send-off. The newlyweds and their parents exited the venue first, lining up at the exit for the send-off. "Mom, how was my letter?" Julie asked while we were getting into position, following the staff's instructions. "I was happy. I have another treasure now. I put all my true feelings into it. Thank you." "You're welcome. I was planning to read it in front of those who didn't come today." "Right. Julie had mentioned that initially. The letter was written assuming her father and others would be present. I wonder what would have happened if they had actually been there. I had already told his parents everything in advance. I thought there might be some trouble, and I had planned to read this letter from the beginning. Through Julie and her husband, I saw his parents smiling at me. It must have been tough. Please let us know if there's anything we can do for you, even through Julie. Their kind words warmed my heart. I hadn't expected to be understood like this. Being busy with work and home, I was just trying to get through the suffocating days. I was focused on protecting Julie and not succumbing to unfairness, without thinking to change the situation or ask for help. Maybe the world is kinder than I thought. And it was Julie who made me realize that. Thank you. I truly am a happy mother. During the send-off, guests were openly expressing their dissatisfaction and complaints about my husband and in-laws. Julie's friends were especially praising her for doing well, and some were even moved to tears. It seems they had been sharing the family situation with their longtime friends, who had been supportive of Julie's struggles. They were ready to back her up in case anything happened during the wedding. Surrounded by such wonderful friends, Julie is indeed blessed. And to me, everyone offered words of sympathy and support. Despite the scandalous reveal of our family situation, hardly anyone reacted as if they were walking on eggshells. Everyone was so kind. Surely, it's Julie and her husband's good nature that has brought these wonderful people together. I'm proud of my daughter, and I'm grateful for such a wonderful son-in-law. It turned out to be the happiest wedding ceremony I could have asked for. I'm nothing but grateful to Julie. What did you say to the manager? After seeing off Julie's in-laws on Monday, shortly after parting ways with Julie and her husband, I received a call from my husband. As soon as I answered, he blurted out the sentence above. What are you talking about? Why are Mark and I on house arrest? It seemed my husband was furious, but this house arrest he mentioned couldn't possibly be my fault, so I sighed at yet another one of his baseless complaints and tirades. Well, I had heard some of the story from the manager. Didn't the manager tell you the reason? So you did say something unnecessary. Did you go snitch on us? They were at your daughter's wedding, so it's not like there's anything to snitch about. What? Why did you invite him? He's a neighbor, and we always receive their help, plus the manager's daughter is Julie's senior. It's not strange at all. The manager of my husband and son's company happens to be our neighbor. My husband wouldn't know since he doesn't do anything around the house, but the manager and his wife actively participate in community cleanups, festivals, and children's event organizations, giving me many chances to talk to them. Above all, it was Julie who decided to invite the manager and his wife to the wedding, and she sent out the invitations. After the letter incident, it's clear now she wanted the manager to see my husband and son's true nature. At the wedding send-off, the manager was furious with my husband and son. Knowing how they had treated me and my daughter, and the fact they didn't attend the wedding, opting for a trip to Palm Springs instead, he condemned it as unbelievable and said he would report it to the company president. Apparently, my husband and son don't have a good reputation in the company either. Though it's mostly rumors, there are stories of them disregarding women's opinions in meetings and behaving disrespectfully towards female employees. However, no formal complaints or protests have been raised. There shouldn't be smoke without fire, yet the true situation remains unclear. It's conceivable that some form of pressure has been applied to quash these issues. Given my husband's position, it's even more plausible that he could suppress younger employees by wielding his power or applying pressure. I believe he's capable of such actions. The manager seems to have realized this might be an issue of their character. Even if it's the son of an employee, it could become a serious matter, but my husband has subordinates. It's unacceptable for someone in a leadership role to exhibit behavior that goes against the times. According to the manager, the president has publicly declared that he will not tolerate character assassination or gender discrimination, and some form of disciplinary action will likely be taken against my husband and son. Damn it! What are we supposed to do now? It's your own doing. What? Who do you think you're talking to? Who else but you? Besides, Where are you now? Just got off the plane. And then I get a call from the manager while we're just about to head home. From my husband's words, I deduced it would be about an hour before they got home. I felt relieved that I had decided to pack up and leave. Julie is moving into her new place, and I'm going back to my parents' house. To your parents? I left the divorce papers on the table for you to sign. What? You'll be hearing from my lawyer later. Hey! I hung up without listening to the rest of what he had to say. Julie took action, making the misconduct of my in-laws and husband known. I'm done tolerating. I'm going to live freely and happily. Later, I heard from the manager's wife, who told me about the investigation at the company. It was revealed that my husband and son had often behaved dismissively towards women. Most importantly, after learning about the wedding incident, the president condemned, "A person who doesn't value their family cannot be trusted," and my husband and son faced demotions and pay cuts. Truly, they brought it upon themselves. Shortly after the disciplinary actions were taken, my husband called me. All this trouble because of you guys. Once again, he was shifting blame and lashing out. It's so tiresomely predictable. You brought this on yourself. Did you submit the divorce papers? I never said anything about getting divorced. I had anticipated he would be obstinate. Both my in-laws and husband care about appearances. They try to hide anything that might look bad, even resorting to lies if necessary. But this time, it's futile. The neighborhood already knows about the wedding incident, as told by the manager's wife. I'll be consulting with a lawyer, and there's no option but to divorce. You'll also be paying alimony. Alimony? Why? You owe me for years of emotional distress. I don't have that kind of money. Even though you're working? We had split the household finances, with my husband covering the house-related expenses and me taking care of daily expenses like food. I had no idea how much he had saved, but considering his salary and our dual income setup, claiming he couldn't pay was unthinkable. It seems, however, that he had been squandering any available funds on things like a new car for my son, expensive suits, and taking my in-laws on trips. So, he wants to rely on my earnings even more by avoiding divorce. Not a chance. Michelle, reconsider the divorce, will you? It's creepy. What? I will definitely get a divorce. And I will get the alimony. Be prepared. With that, I ended the call. It took some time, but the divorce was finalized without issue, and I managed to get the alimony. When we conveyed through the lawyer that we were ready to take it to court if he didn't agree to the divorce, he quickly agreed to a settlement divorce. He probably thought dragging it out to court would look bad. Interestingly, my husband and son felt uncomfortable at the company and eventually resigned on their own. My husband is now juggling part-time jobs to cover living expenses and alimony, but there's a limit to what he can earn, so they're selling the house and moving in with his parents, along with my son. Spoiled endlessly and with nothing but high pride, my son, looked down upon by his colleagues and ridiculed by friends, has become reclusive, not working, and shutting himself in his room. The downfall of their proud son and grandson has shocked my husband's parents, leaving them bedridden from the shock. In every aspect, they've reaped what they sowed. Julie is currently pregnant and soon entering her final month. I'm looking forward to the day my grandchild is born. Julie mentioned it seems to be a boy, but she's adamant about not letting my husband and his family meet or even know about him. This, too, is a result of their own actions. As for me, initially, I stayed with my parents, but now I've rented a condo close to my workplace and am living alone. Having free time has allowed me to start going to the gym, and Julie and her husband visit me quite often. I'm leading a fulfilling life, and every day is enjoyable. My life is still full of many more happy moments to come.